So I have done some cutting because I don't think it's necessary to show how I cut anymore. But I'll go ahead and line up what I have alongside this so it's clear what I'm building out of the colors that I have. These, as you can see, the orange are bringing out more of the background buildings. I have the blues from the time of day and the lighting. Again, the blues from the street. And I'm starting to build upon the grid structure of the French Quarter. I have land data and geographic data that brings out the reds again, but still exists primarily in the whites and a little splash of blue to continue. And again, the oranges, the reds, the greens from those pieces I cut earlier, and two little phrases. We have officially reached calm and collected. I figure we're all a bit cooped up with our families and friends, and we don't have as much opportunity to get out, and so for now, playing around with pictures in the city is a way for us to get out of the feeling that we're stuck right now. And so I'll start showing how I plan to lay this out, and then we can start seeing what techniques I need to build this image up in a way that really brings everything out. For this, I want to follow the same flow as the white is already in this image, and also the same direction of the reds, but I want to accentuate and bring the reds away from that side of the image a bit, and slightly reorganize the way space is in this. And so by using a bit more red behind, I'm also able to give this block a feeling of three-dimensionality, and that's what I'm trying to do, to follow the lines of the street in a way to really build up this block outside of the frame, because it goes very deep, but it's all behind this car. And so what I want to do is reinforce the idea that some of the stuff is behind the car, but then also bring everything forward as well. So I'm looking something like this. I want to bring out three-dimensionality with my elements, and so one by one I'm going to do things that reinforce the spaces already in the picture. This becomes multiple cubes building up a feeling of just kind of not fitting in the space, it starts to pop out. And continuing that, I want to bring down this line of white into here. Bring it down, match up the lines, bring down the green, continue the directions. But right now, if you'll notice, one of the problems is everything is a little bit too bunched up right now. It all kind of is stuck in front of the image, and that's a problem if we're trying to make everything fit into this image. We want everything to go back into it, not come out of it. We want to even out what we've got. And so what I'm going to start by doing is assuming that these green elements are slowly going to pass through everything from the front of the picture to the back of the picture. So they're going to be going in and out and taking a while to be put into place. So this is really all I need from that, because that's the one in the back and that's the one we want to start with. And the same over here. This I want to be the bottom, and this I want to be coming out in front of that. So I want this here. I want to use this in an angle that intersects with the street, and I can even use the street lines to keep that idea, but I don't want it in front of the car. I want it behind the car. So the first thing I need to do is start changing around the background in the way I did the foreground on some of the previous pieces. I need to give myself a way to sneak behind the image. So for starters, I'm going to take this car and cut very carefully around it. Notice that this kind of knife, as you're dragging around corners, can cause some dents and cuts in the paper, so you gotta, as always, be careful both not to cut yourself and also not to mess up the image that you're starting to use. You want to keep everything nice and even so that you don't have trouble making the image that you want to make. So notice I went through on one side, not both, but on one side, because I don't need the whole image. I want to start dividing up. And so now, if I line that up, now that'll go underneath the car, but I don't need to cut out any more of the car to let that happen. That's enough. And the same if I want to bring this in. I can additionally, and this is the thing, you'll once in a while decide you want more space. And so for me, I wanted just a little bit more of the hood so that I could add this underneath as well and test out these ideas. And you just slowly and surely start connecting everything together. Now, we're a little bit more in the background, but I think there's still room to pull in the picture, and I think the next place we can do that is to cut out the curb and put that on top of this. That way it will come up from the back and be part of the concrete, but the curb is higher than. And this is how we are kind of going back and forth and adding layers to what we're working on, so that we can get a really three-dimensional piece here. And one thing that's important when I'm working with that curve is I need to know how high up that stop sign to cut, because that stop sign has to go above the rest. I'm going to slot the other cutting I have there all the way up under the curve and make it come around the top. So for now, let's get that set up. Right there, it's going to meet the cut we already have. This is why you have to do a lot more careful work when you're working with a background that already exists, because you don't really have room to mess up. Like this, I have to have attached to just that street sign, or else I can't get it in the right zone. But now I can close that over it and bring the car over it as well, and things start breaking apart. And that's kind of the point of this, is to really play around with where I want to take this. So now I'm going to glue this, because that's the farthest back I want to go. I want it, this piece, under everything else. So I'm going to start with the curb underneath the stop sign, because this curb is going to need to have glue on it already once I put the next part down. And then, as always, around the borders, and then fill in the middle. And then for this piece, I want to line up, fold back, and my guiding line is right there. I'm aligning this with the street, and therefore I've got a set plan. I close this up, I close the street over it, and now it's starting to build that depth that I needed to exist in the main image and not just in the foreground. I need that depth to go all the way through. So where's the next place I'm going to need to adjust? For now, I know that I want that meeting that same point there. But what if I have it come up underneath? That way, I'm continuing the theme of the foreground and background mixing, because that's why we're using these backgrounds, so that we can really mix inside the picture. And I feel like that's the most interesting things that you can do with collage, are pushing through and turning one picture into a three-dimensional space. And so let's start out first by adding depth to this portion. And I want to make sure that my pieces stick as well as possible. Sometimes I might have to re-glue, or it'll start sticking right when I give up on it. But now, what I can do when I'm building into this point is, again, I only needed the tiniest bit of that red, but what I wanted it for was to make it blend in, because now when I go into that gap, I'm further blending everything into this single three-dimensional structure. And I don't need to worry about where everything's going yet. I just need to worry about the order I'm putting things down. This can't go down yet, because I need to start building out these. So how do I want these laid out? I want this one all the way in the back, but there's no real way to have it blend in and still provide the same effect. So this I actually do want just to be straight on top of the image. I'm going to start again all around the corners, fill in, and slowly but surely I'm going to build this back up to that practice image that I was setting up already. I want to keep this as three-dimensional as possible, so I want to keep use of all of these pieces. Just building up layer by layer. Right now, because all of this is free-floating, I don't need to worry too much about where things go, and just that they're aligned. So this I want to have coming out of this window, again mirroring the colors from the other sides, but just enough different because that one is going to be covered. And what it's going to be covered with is all of us little people stuck in our little lockdowns. And so to do that, I'm going to go ahead and cut holes around these. Again, I just want to keep building up as much depth as possible in this image. I want to have every layer going back and forth over itself, so that even though it's all flat, it still looks like it's 3D. Way to do that is layering. Now I can slide this through. So in order to slide it through, I'm going to combine these and make it into a single piece, because once it's a single piece, I can move it so much more easily and make sure that it's in the right place. See, now this will slide all the way through. Again, always being careful, always making sure that everything fits before I glue it, because once I start putting the glue on, it's going to be so much harder to test this all out and make sure it works. But I think that's a pretty good try. So now I am going to go ahead and commit that piece in. Remember that it'll be easier to slide it up through. Make sure that I have this at an angle that is more interesting. And right now, I think this is the shape that I would rather go with, because then I can line everything up but still have it all fit in. So again, layer of glue, start weaving in and out. And that's the thing, you don't even need to have glue. You could literally weave your collage together if you wanted. You just need a way to attach things. And that means you can do really cool stuff if you know how to tie things together. You have different tools for attaching things. Notice that that's going through the back, and now I weave it forward again, and one more time through the bottom, and one more time through the top. And these are some of the hardest to do if you want to keep them intact, because you don't want to just force it. You want it to move slowly and steadily and get into a really good position. And that just takes time and patience to make sure everything lines up. And I'm going to do the same technique that I've been doing many times. Take my other knife and drag it through a little bit of glue and get the underside of this, because this is a longer piece. It's not going to work with just one little bit of glue. It needs a little bit more. Now, hopefully, with a couple of ideas on how you can put everything together, you can work alongside me instead of just watching. And as I'm building this piece, you can be building your own. Again, one piece at a time, just keep getting closer and closer to the foreground, making sure that I pass in front of and behind different objects to keep everything in a organized and controlled pattern. This, I need to use my knife because even though it's small, I want this to go in front of that. I want it to barely overlap so that I can have it go behind the curve, but in front of that patch of map there. But now, my next step is to start figuring out where the last few pieces are going to fall in. Because this, I don't want to intersect, I want it to go behind. And then slowly go in front of each element until I'm now in the foreground. And that way I haven't pushed through nearly as much of this image. And the amount of space I need to fill that up would have meant that this piece would have been there, and that's why I removed it. I'm trying to keep this all at relatively even spacing.